So we're going to talk now about really how to run the system. So much of it is so easy to run them. Hook them up, put the sensors on, press the button, or double tap the name. We'll talk about different ways to get it started, but I'll give you a little bit, some deeper insight into some other things that are going on. There's a lot of help for this in the website. There are a lot of videos, there are a lot of things that will point you to in the PASS area. Those of you who don't have systems yet, the PASS is the members only area in kind of the back end of the website that has a lot of documents and forms and videos and historic webinars and things like that. So we haven't really talked in any detail besides just throwing out a lot of terms of the components of NeurOptimal. So just so you know what we're talking about as we're going through this, this is what we call the Z-AMP. All neurofeedback systems will have some sort of an encoder, an amplifier. We call ours the Z-AMP. It collects this data, coming off of these sensors from the head. It does some math actually in this. Remember, it's the first level of denoising, converts it into a format, a digital format that the system can understand, sends it down that tremendously long USB cable to the computer. Most of them are these Surface Pro tablets. There's the option of getting it on a Surface Book. Has a detachable top so that it can be used sort of like a tablet. All of them do a great job of running the software. It's just, personal choice, actually. We're going to look at just how to add clients, locations, trainers, starting a session, and the always discussed after session views. Hopefully, you guys have seen this general tour that Sam did. We're going to watch this video just to make sure we're all on the same level. This will help those who don't have a system yet and those who haven't watched it. And then I'm going to take each part of this and just go into a little bit deeper information, really on most parts of it. So
this is a general tour of NeurOptimal 3. Before we begin, some general information about NeurOptimal 3. NeurOptimal requires you to be online at least once per week while you're using it. There are a number of reasons for this, including updates and license verification. Now let's get started. When you launch NeurOptimal, you'll notice 4 windows open. This window is called the Vault. It's the hub of NeurOptimal. You control everything when you're not actually running a session here. This window is called the NeurOptimal Media Player, or what we've affectionately been calling NOMP during the development process. It is the window you use to control the media during the session. This window here is called GeForce. This is the window that's pulled to the client monitor during the session and is the one that the client watches throughout their session. If I had an external monitor plugged in to my system right now, that window would have gone straight over to the external monitor. I'm going to minimize this for now. The 4th window is called the Media Center. We only interact with it when we're using audiovisual sources like movie files, DVDs, and streaming sources. I will minimize this for now as well. You'll notice that when NeurOptimal launches, there are also 3 icons that launch at the bottom of your screen. So you've got the NeurOptimal icon, and when you hover over it, it shows the Vault, the Media Player, as well as the tunnels and waterfalls, which we'll get to in another video. Then you've got this blue icon, which actually looks like a K. It stands for Kodi, and that's what the NeurOptimal Media Center is built on. And then you've got the GeForce for NeurOptimal icon as well. So let's take a look at the Vault for now. So you'll see upon startup that it's broken down into 2 columns and is resizable. You may decide that you prefer to see it in the 4-column view. like this, which shows the trainer and location. You can set this to launch this way at startup in the Preferences section found in the Tools menu. I'm going to take a moment to walk you through the main gestures to get around NeurOptimal 3, which has been specifically built to be used on a touchscreen. So there's the double tap, which is the equivalent of the double click, and the tap and hold, which is the equivalent of a right click. So I'll show you what I'm doing now. I am putting my finger on the screen on the trainer column header. And so I have touched the screen, I'm holding it there, and then when I release my finger, we'll see what we would otherwise think of as a right-click menu. So now we've got all the choices under the trainer heading that are available to us. So as you can see, anywhere that I tap and hold will bring up a submenu for that item. So if I tap and hold the name of a client, for example, a different menu will pop up than if I tap and hold a session, which is also different from a tap and hold on any of the headers above. Tap and hold anything in the vault will result in a list of possible actions appearing. The other way to get around in the vault is by taking it one step further and using the double tap. Performing a double tap on pretty much anything in the vault will result in the most common action for that item taking place. For example, if we double tap on the word client, then it'll bring up the Add a Client window. Double tap the word session in the header, and your list of clients pop up to choose from to start a session. Double tap the name of your client, and the session starts for that client. How simple is that? To the right of the vault, you'll find 4 icons. A tap on each of these icons provides you with an explanation of what each one is for. We'll go more into depth on what each of these is for in a video called NeurOptimal 3 In-Depth Tour, and that's given by Dr. Valdine Brown. Now let's start a session. So I'm going to double tap the name of the client in order to start a session for that client. Okay, so you'll notice that the vault has disappeared and the matrix mirror has popped up and the music has begun. You also notice that the timer on the left is starting to go up, and the timer on the right has begun to decrement or go down. And GeForce has started in the background. Again, if this would have been on a second monitor, then we'd be watching GeForce on that monitor. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the NeurOptimal Media Player and its controls. Tap on the playlist icon to display the current playlist. So as you can see, this music, NeurOptimal number 3, is actually broken down into a playlist of 6 different parts. Tap the OneNote icon to display the various other media sources you can switch to during a session. You can find more information about that in another video called Using Different Media in a Session. This icon is the repeat icon. You can choose to repeat a single item in a playlist or the entire playlist by choosing the icon either with the 1 or A for all, if you want to repeat the entire list. Tap the previous icon to restart the current track, or tap it twice to bring you back to the previous track. The pause button pauses the session and then changes to the play button. To unpause, once it's paused, tap the play button. The next icon takes you to the next track. This is the shuffle button. Activate it and it'll shuffle the current playlist. This is the stop button. You can press that to stop your session. And this one we'll get more into in a different video, but this is if you want to take notes during your session. You can click on this icon and a note box will pop up. You can enter your notes, tap insert note, and then the note will be inserted into your session for retrieval later on. You control the volume in the actual main system. There's no volume control in the media player. This is GeForce. This is what you watch during your session, and you can make it full screen by tapping on the little square at the top right of the window. More detailed information about NO3 can be found in the NeurOptimal 3 in-depth tour, also located in our video library.
There. I'm sorry if that was boring to some that have been using it, but I think it at least gives us a common place to start from, since we've got different usage levels. How to start and where the help is and all. All of you that have the systems should have gotten a printed manual with it. There's a lot of information in that printed manual. If you've lost that manual, it's also available for you online in that past section under documents. And it's also available to you on your system. If you go to the start screen to those icons, you can get to your manual there. Okay. Lots and lots of different resources to go to for help. The Facebook community group, the Facebook PASS group, very, very active groups. But you have to have your system connected to the internet. And most people are very comfortable with this now. It's just going to the Wi-Fi icon in the lower right-hand corner of the tray, picking your system. Always just click connect automatically, and then you never have to do it again. And then it will just always be on the Wi-Fi. Couple of really important things that get addressed with that is that, one, it's always accepting the Windows 10 updates. Almost to a frustrating point, Microsoft keeps updating Windows. Many times a big update once a week and little updates separately throughout the week. But it's very, very important that Windows 10 stays as updated as it can. So you want to allow those. You want to just keep it online and allow that to happen. Secondly, Samantha referred to this, that there's a 7-day kind of licensing / update window on the system. A little bit of a misunderstanding with some people on how that 7 days applies. But it's just that every time you turn on the system, it kind of pings the mothership and says, are there any NeurOptimal updates for me? And then if there are, you'll get the standard, hey, there's an update. Do you want to do it now or later? We've done it that way to keep everybody worldwide basically running the same software and up to date with all of the Windows 10 updates that are happening all the time. So the way this 7-day window works is if today you get online and it checks for updates. You don't really have to be online for another 7 days. Resets the 7-day count every time it checks. So you can be in you don't have to be online. You can be in an airplane, you can be out in the middle of the woods, wherever you want to do your sessions. But if you reach that 7-day timer and you haven't gotten back online, it's going to say, basically, hey, you haven't been online for a week, get online, make sure there's no updates. Some people, when this first rolled out, started contacting Zengar and saying, hey, I'm going to be on vacation for 2 weeks, and that I have to let you know I lose my license or whatever. It's not the case. It's just that the next time you get online, 2 or 3 weeks later, the next time you run a session, just make sure it's online. It'll go through that process. It'll reset and you'll be fine. I think that the only reason you need to contact NeurOptimal that you're going to be without internet service is, say you're doing mission work and you're taking your system somewhere for 2 weeks that there simply isn't internet connection at all, and you need it to work for those 2 weeks. They can make that exception. But for the most part, all of us have access to, as we're routinely using it, to get it on the internet at least once every 7 days. Interestingly enough, we've sold some of these systems to Amish families that will occasionally take them to the Starbucks, log in, start a session, and then take it back and charge it, and then take it back home. So if the Amish can work it out, the rest of us can work it out pretty good. Setting up the client monitor. All of the professional systems come configured to run a separate monitor. Personal systems are not set up that way. The professional system idea is that the technician sitting here with the tablet in front of them starting the program, the client is sitting in a comfortable chair or somewhere else looking at a separate monitor with only G-force exposed, just the colors and shapes that we showed there. So hooking them up, very, very straightforward as far as hooking up most any monitor, except for the fact that the tablets and the Surface Books, the ones that are more like laptops, they don't have an HDMI port on them. They only have this mini port, and between the two, they're two different ones. So you need this adapter that goes from regular HDMI to the correct port on your system. And you just plug it into there, you plug it into the HDMI port on the back of the monitor. When you start up the NeurOptimal system, it will automatically put G-force over onto that separate monitor, and hopefully there won't be any issues. But for the most part, it ought to be over there, it ought to be maximized. If you hooked up the extra monitor after you already had the system up, you would have to close NeurOptimal down and restart it so that it recognizes that that other monitor is there. Samantha referred to the processes of the touch screens. There's 3 touch screen motions that are the same as using the touchpad or using a mouse. There's tap, double tap, and tap and hold. Tap is exactly like a single click on the mouse, what you're used to doing all the time. Double tap is the same as enter. Tap and hold is going to be your equivalent to the right click. So really, and this is in your manual, but these top 2, if this is all you learn, it's all you ever have to do. After you open the system, double tap in header, add a client window will appear. Once you get that client added, just name and first last name, they'll be in your client list, and double tapping on that client will start the session. At the end of the session will automatically stop, you're done. So if that's all you do, you're good to go. Now you can tap around in the header, you can tap around on the different sessions and things like that, and you can see all those other options, but your day-to-day activity is going to be those double taps. I mean, really, really simple. Honestly, even if you're not comfortable with touchscreen yet, pretty quickly you get to the point where you just tap, tap, and it's running. To start the NeurOptimal program itself, there are two different ways. One, this Zengar icon is in the toolbar, the lower toolbar of your system. Just a tap on that will start the program. You're starting to get a little sense of how much math is going on in there. So it takes a few seconds to launch the program. There's a lot of it to boot up into active, if you will. So just tap it. You'll see that a little line will come underneath it when it's active. And so just let it start up. You also, on the start menu, kind of the historical icon page, there's always a NeurOptimal icon that you can double tap on to start it. You get to that start page by the little Windows icon in the very lower left-hand corner. Tapping that will bring you to that icon, to what we call the start page. There's a lot of other interesting things on there. You can force the updates from there. You can do maintenance and a number of other things from there. So familiarize yourself with that page. You can get by without it too. When the vault opens, when the software system opens, you'll open up into the vault. It'll look one of these two ways. Most of you have the Pro system, only slightly different than the personal system. You can see right here what the license is, personal or professional. And the only glaring difference here is it doesn't have the archive folder here to archive your sessions. Under the assumption that if you're using it personal only, you're using it at home, you're not putting in 40 or 50 or 60 different clients' data that you need to archive some of it to make the system easier to use. You don't have to look through everything. Interesting point that you should know, the personal and the professional systems are exactly the same software inside. They're just licensed different, access to the bells and whistles or a couple different things, but the session the client is receiving is exactly the same, whether it's a personal or a professional. When we double tap client in the top, it's going to open up this add a client window called client information. There's a couple asterisks here, first and last name. It's the only thing required to add a client. You can be nice and assign them the correct gender, male or female. We don't have an other at this point, but I think at some point we may. And you don't even have to change the birthday if you don't want. It will always default to today's date when you're putting someone in. Many times I've just left it that way, just so I know, just by looking at this, what day they started. Because the system doesn't care whether it's male or female. The system doesn't care whether they're 2 years old, 20 years old, 92 years old. It just doesn't care. To the point it doesn't care if it's an animal or a human, honestly. It's going to take that stream of data and respond to it the way it's programmed to respond to it, regardless of any of that. The first and the last name, if you're worried about client confidentiality, you can put in just first name and last initial if you want. There's a way to make it confidential on your client list where it replaces many of the letters with asterisks. So once you fill this in, all of these other pages, address, phone, email, trainer, notes, not required, but you can use that if you want to use the system to keep all of your customer demographics. Many times you've got other accounting systems or something that you have that in, so you don't need to. The system itself doesn't need that to run. And honestly, to that point, many people now don't even put in their clients' names. They just do all their sessions under Al Digit's name, the default name that's here. They're going to get the same value of the session whether the system is working under Al Digit's name or their own personal name. Now, personally, I don't like that much because I like to have the digital record of that client having been in. Only a couple times, and now probably the decades that we've been doing this, someone said, hey, you charged me for that April 2nd session, and I'm pretty sure I canceled that and didn't come in. And I'll pull up the system and say, well, I've got a session, I've got cortical data for you being in the chair dated April 2nd. I'm pretty sure that you were here. It's the only time that I've really had to go back to kind of prove that they were there. But if it was all under ALDigit, I wouldn't have been able to. In the vault, this will show your licensing. Most of you will say professional. Now, there are a good number of us that are using professional systems as rentals, but we'll actually license them as personal systems so that a lot of these bells and whistles and views are taken away from someone that I've mailed a system to. So we have the ability to toggle back and forth between those. The archive box that I remember in the personal system, it's not there. One of the options when you right-click or tap and hold on a person or a session itself is, do you want to archive this? Where we use this, where it makes sense to use this, is you've got Abe has been in here and they've seen you 30 sessions. And they've said, you know what, I'm good, thank you, see ya. You could take Abe, archive him, and then say 6 or 8 months from now, he says, you know what, I'd really appreciate another session or two. You can go into the archive and pull them back and have them back into your active list. But if you're seeing 30 or 35 sessions a week, after not too very long, this vault gets pretty bulky of people to kind of sort through when a new client comes in. The header line that Sam talked about, it will always default to client and session. I'll show you in a minute how to add it back to trainer and location. Something will be highlighted. I mean, you can, just by clicking on it, you can move down to a different one. Everything you do on this is automatically time and date stamped. So you can see exactly when they were here and what time. Names are always last name and then first name. This active client list. This is one place where you'll really spend some time if you see many clients. Right now you'll see that all is super bolded and D is bolded and Q is bolded. What this tells me is I have clients in A, D, and Q. Anybody with a new system now, ALDigit is on every system. That's many times what we'll use when we're trying to sort through an issue or run a practice session and don't want anybody else's data to get messed up. And lately we've been using quality control to run the first test sessions in, and quite possibly any further tests at any point. We'll put them under quality control. The dustbin works exactly like the recycle bin on Windows 10. If you were to throw one of these clients away, say I'm never going to see Abe again, trash him, it would first, just like everything else, say, are you really sure you want to trash him? And if you say yes, it'll go into the trash bin, and then the lid will be off of it, off to the side, with a visual clue that you've got something in your trash bin. If you really, really want to delete them, then you can go in there and delete them, and then it'll ask you again, are you sure you want to do this? So you have to go through a multi-step process, but once it's gone, like everything else, once you've gone and told it, yes, I'm sure so many times, it's going to be gone for good. In the tools, you saw Samantha highlight this. Right-clicking on that is going to give you a menu. We're going to go through that in more detail. There's a message here. If this is exposed, it says you've got a message. Now, we have the ability to message back and forth between Neuroptimal headquarters. And we don't use that hardly at all yet, but I see that probably being used more and more. The NeurOptimal itself, Zengar, can say it may get a heads up that there's a huge Windows 10 update coming out next weekend or whatever, which is really nice. They are starting to give us giving us a pre-look at updates now, which is good because sometimes they'll throw something else out and we've got to then code to it. They might say, this is a 2 to 3 hour update. We might put a message here that says, hey everyone, next weekend they're releasing a huge Windows 10 update. Make sure you leave your system online overnight to make sure it has time to download it, or something like that. Or I see us starting to use this in that, hey, your past membership is going to expire next month. Do you want to talk to somebody about extending it or not? Because they have the ability to go specifically to a particular one. So just look for that. If you see it, click on it and see what's under it. I hope that they do start to use it more. And then, of course, the legend tells you whether something's in the archive or in the dustbin or something. The systems come default with no password. If you go into the bottom Cortana box in the lower left-hand corner, it's the easiest way. Basically what you need to do is you need to set a Windows 10 password. And if you go in there and just type password, it will come up to the point, allow you to click through to set a Windows password. But there's no password in NeurOptimal itself. We'll have to do that in Windows. So tray view. By hovering over the NeurOptimal icon in the tray, and you can see that one's kind of like highlighted, will show you the NeurOptimal windows that are open. After session views, we're going to talk about those and the validity of them or not, but they're always kind of open way in the background. And then you've got your vault and your media player. Remember, like Sam said, also referred to as NOMP, NeurOptimal Media Player. The only time you'd need that is if you're on a support call and they say something about, can you see the NOMP? They're going to throw out an acronym, and just good for you to know that. There's not a lot of discussion on a daily basis about NOMP. Navigating NeurOptimal. This is the page that's in your manual and exactly the same items that I went over before, so I'm not going to bore you to go through that again, but we really just wanted to point out in the manual you can get this same information. When you go to the archive file, it's going to look like this. We've got nothing archived here currently, but it will bring all of the data. Remember, we talked about archiving Abe. If we had done that, he would be here with all of his sessions. We could right-click on him here, and we could say, move him back to the vault. Okay, make him active, basically. So what happens if you want to see trainer location and you don't? Now, first, probably most of you are just getting started. You probably don't have multiple trainers or multiple locations. So this is why we've set the vault to default to only client and session. But if you want to see that, just press and hold up there in the header where it says client or session, and one of the options you'll get will be show trainer and location. Just expand it to that, it will show it to you. Lisa and I have had many times up to 3 locations and multiple trainers moving in and amongst those locations. And so at that point, we would want to see this. We'd want to see, yes, Sheila saw Abe at location 1 or whatever. For the most part, you guys won't need it, but it's there. Remember, I talked about showing clients confidential. If we have clients confidential selected, it's going to do this: 2 letters of the last name, an asterisk for everyone, first letter of the first name, and asterisk for everyone. Amazingly, when we took this picture, it looks a lot like Lisa DeLong, Mark DeLong, Samantha DeLong, our daughter-in-law. So if you know the code, you can figure it out. And here's what it looks like with trainer and location. Of course, At this point, we only had the one location, so everything was just defaulted. So what can you do with a session? You can right-click on it and see the options that are available. Play back this session, look at the tunnels, look at the waterfalls. And as you play back that session, it's going to look exactly like it did when you did it. The matrix mirror is going to play, and it's going to be as if the session is running right then. There's not a lot of value to be derived from that, because remember, every session is different. People are different at every time. No matter what we think we see in that, we're not going to change something we do the next time. The need to play them back is pretty minimal. I suppose if you're in some sort of a research environment and you were taking notes that at 17 minutes in, I hiccuped and I wanted to see what that looked like, or something like that. The only difference will be it will expose with what we call the train player. You're playing back at training rather than the NeurOptimal media player. So you probably noticed that some windows are rounded. The train player and the media player have rounded corners. It just means they can't be resized. You saw Sam in her video grabbing the corner of the vault and making it bigger and smaller. The train player and the media player, they don't resize. Just they're the perfect size, and there's no reason to need to do it. When you're in the middle of playing something back, you can grab that progress bar and go back and forth through it. So the matrix mirror, this main mirror, basically we have 20 time frequency envelopes. We moved up from 16, there's 20 time frequency envelopes. You can change the scale within it. You can separate the spectra and targets. Those of you who have had a professional system, this will look very, very similar to you. But what this view allows me to do is kind of visually show you. We're showing you from, see, the 0 really doesn't have a bin there, but starting at 1, we go all the way up to 64. These are the different frequencies, okay, that we're displaying. In this 1 Hertz bin, this is, remember, 1 complete waveform in 1 second. Get up here to 64, we've got 64 complete waveforms in that same second. And then all of the, of course, all the way in between. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and highlights the difference between those two. So in real time, we're watching these bounce in and out as we're, remember, sampling that data 256 times a second, displaying it in this manner. Now we talk about these time frequency envelopes, and you'll see these green boxes are basically the time frequency envelopes we've spoken about. Now, let me just go around one of them. They almost all will overlap this way, up and down, but they all overlap each other left to right also. So this left time frequency envelope comes over to this, and the right comes over to here. So you see, here is where they are overlapping. Here is where they're overlapping up and down. And we call these envelopes because, like everything else, they're not static. They have the ability to swell and contract. And so with the underlying cortical activity that's in them. So you'll see these overlap here. Actually, when we get down into here, some of these are wholly inside of other ones. Some of them overlap this way. This one's wholly in there. You can see that 7 Hertz is not even in any of the time frequency envelopes. That's by design, something outside of this class really, and absolutely not on the quiz, so don't worry about it. But the universe resonates at about a 7 hertz cycle. This was developed by a professor called Schumann, and so it's referred to as the Schumann frequency. And we've evolved and have lived our entire life in this universe, and so 7 hertz is a very comfortable place for us to be. So that's the design of not playing in that at all. That's just allowed to do what it wants to do at all times. So a lot of this is secret sauce as to why these frequencies were developed, why these time frequency envelopes were developed in this way. But what you can see, given all the history that Lisa gave you, the history of neurofeedback in general and the history of Neuroptimal specifically, you can see how a lot of that has evolved into this, where people will say things like, well, I think you should be working on alpha theta ratio. I think you should be working on beta because I have this, or I think you should be working on blah instead of blah. So-and-so down the street that uses a linear system says, I have to have more theta. Well, it's not that we're ignoring all of that. In deference to that, we're not ignoring it. We're looking at all of it all the time. So someone that comes in that has this other take on, gee, you should be doing theta work, or they'll say it some way like that, say, well, absolutely. And we're doing that and everything else at the same time. We're constantly monitoring all of these frequencies all of the time, instead of only looking at theta and thinking that theta is the answer to all your ills. But rest assured, we're looking at that. We're just looking at everything else too. The target lines here, there's one of these target lines associated with each one of the time frequency envelopes. I don't like the word target in the same way that I didn't like the word range earlier. So just think of it in this realm, that we don't care where any one of these is specifically. It's not that we've set a target for them to reach or not reach. This is simply the answer to the mathematics of the joint time frequency analysis that's going on within each one of these time frequency envelopes. Now, the fact that they're yellow when they're outside of the box and white when they're inside of the box, in a very general term, this has triggered a break in the music. It's probably not triggering it now because it's outside. It probably triggered it as it was shifting. So this doesn't mean that all of these are triggering exactly now, but we did catch a picture where there was a lot of them outside of their time frequency envelopes. So it's fun to watch. We're not going to draw any conclusions to it, because as the underlying cortical activity changes here, you're going to see these boxes moving in and out and swelling and moving to that. This is the dance that's going on between the software and the client. Now you can right click anywhere on this screen and you can separate these time frequency envelopes from the underlying spectra, the underlying cortical activity. It'll just open up a second box over here and they'll be separate. A little cleaner if you want to look at one particular item, but I really enjoy it here because here you can see the dance between the two and see kind of where is triggering and where isn't. But there again, it's giving that client what they need in that moment, and it just is. It just is what's happening in that moment. The media player, the NULP. We have a lot of different audiovisual sources, some of which we're not even using yet. This is the media player. These are the rounded corners, so you know you can't change it. We have the ability to do some other things in this, but let's go through each one of the pieces of it now. This is just a screenshot of it while it's working. So you have the ability to minimize it, of course. You can put it down into the tray and be done with it. We talked about how our default music, the Jeff Bova music, actually is a 6-portion playlist. So what this is telling me is we're 5 seconds into the first portion of the playlist. We're 32 minutes and 56 seconds left to play in the 33-minute session. If you clicked on repeat here, you have the ability to repeat the section that it's on. So this is the very first portion of the playlist. If you click this and pick the one, you just continue to replay that portion. Here again, it's something that it can do, not much reason to do it, but you can also pick on repeat all. There's no real need to do that because it's a 33-minute piece of music and a 33-minute session. Not much reason to click repeat all or repeat any particular portion unless someone really takes offense to one of them. But you do have the ability to put in other music. And if you, for some reason, uploaded a 25-minute piece of music and you have a 33-minute session, the system would stop when it ran out of music. So you'd stop at 25 minutes. So if you had made that mistake and then you saw during the session, the easiest way to deal with it is click repeat, and then it'll continue to repeat until the session's done. It's about the one use that I could come up with for that. You can pause the session here, which is very, very handy, and you'll all have this happen if somebody gets 10 or 12 minutes into the session and they're starting to relax maybe for the first time in a decade, and they say, I've got to go to the restroom. You say, well, you got 15 minutes left. Can you make it? They go, no. Very easy. If you click pause, if they're an adult and they'll take care of the Z-amp, I'll normally unplug the Z-amp from the USB, put it in their pocket or clip it to their collar and send them down the hall to the restroom. Normally, with a stern warning that Z-amp is worth a couple $1,000s. And so don't drop it in the toilet or the sink. You know, if it was a kid, I might take the sensors out of it, you know, send them just with the sensors still on their head and, you know, wrapped over their shoulder or whatever makes sense at that point. On that note, normally, Lisa and I, we won't unplug those sensors from the Z-amp at all, ever. When they're new, they plug in there so nice and tight that if you take them out after every session, after a while, that plastic that's on the end of those is going to start to wear. It's a soft plastic that's plugging into a harder plastic, and it's going to start to get loose and probably need to be replaced prior than it would have. So we'll just always keep them together. If you're doing research during a session, you can click this note. And like I said before, if you're taking notes that said they hiccuped at this point or whatever, you could do that, or fell asleep or whatever. Not a lot of benefit to that unless you're doing some research and you're going to look at the data and you're going to try to figure something out because you've got an end value of 100 people that are putting through. But remember, whatever we think we see in it, we're not going to change anything. We're going to allow the intelligence in the software to take care of that. When you click on the one big note, you're going to have a number of different options come up. The one you'll use most is the file folder. The file folder is going to open up the Windows folder that holds the default music. If you've loaded any other music into the system, you're going to want to store it in that same folder. It is simply C:\Zengar/media. I mean, so under normal Windows conventions, you're going to put another piece of music in there, and either a WMA or an MP3 music file. It's really kind of a standard digital music file. It will play all those. So if you're wanting to use one of those, you'd start a session, you'd hit pause, you'd come here, you'd go to your folder, you'd pick which one you want, and then you'd start the session. It's very important that if you want to use other music, that it plays through the system. The system has to be able to take that piece of music and interject the interrupts, or you're just listening to a piece of music and you're getting no value. It has the ability to play from a CD or a DVD. All of the systems now are sold, they don't have an internal CD, DVD player. You can, when you order one, get an external one that would plug into a USB. For the most part, my recommendation is if you want to play CD or DVD, you rip it off of that CD, you save it into this folder, and actually at this point, if you're starting to talk movies and all, you'd save it to the card that it comes with. So it's not even on the actual hard drive itself. If you get very many movies or anything in there, it'll fill up. Movies are quite large size-wise. We've built the platform to where we can stream movies, music, and radio, but that's not active yet because there are a tremendous amount of copyright issues to deal with for that. They're trying to get some agreements, but it's interesting that we're in a place now that if we stream somebody else's music through our system, through your system to your client, there's some piracy and copyright issues there. So they're trying to work through it. It's built with that capability, but even YouTube, if you wanted to do YouTube, download those yourself, put them in a format that makes sense, and just store it onto the system itself. And I've done that. We had one here again, another autistic kid, because they're always tied into something. His was bowling. He had this one bowler that he loved to watch. And so I went to YouTube and I downloaded more than 33 minutes of this professional bowler, which worked perfectly because a bowling alley has constant noise. It's a perfect carrier. So it's great to interrupt. I had another teenager once that after the first couple sessions, he got so bored with the Neuroptimal music that he just said, I can't stand it anymore. And I go, well, what do you like? What do you want? And I gave him the parameters of, it's got to be relatively constant music, constant carrier. What do you want? He said, I like to listen to these soccer goal compilation YouTube videos. And what they were 2017's best goals internationally. And it had more than enough time of goal after goal and the lead up to the goal, and all set to music. And he was happy as a clam after that. I really enjoyed coming into his sessions. So we do what we can to make him stay in the seat. When we're replaying a session, we talked about the train player. The train player is just replaying prior trainings. So when you play back a session, and remember we're in our vault, we right click or tap and hold on a session. In this example, we pick the July 17th, 2015 session, and it starts to play back. At this point, the train player is showing me we're 1:19 seconds through 33 minutes. If I was getting some value from this, watching it again, I might enjoy that. I can grab this little dot here and I said, boy, the part I'm interested in is near the end. I click and drag that down to the end, to my 31-minute mark or wherever I wanted to be, and can bounce back and forth and see that. Honestly, I never do that. I never have a reason to do that anymore, but it has that ability. And here again, in maybe a research environment, I can see some value for that. So what's involved in this train player? We can nudge it forward and backward. We can drag it through that bar. We can see where we're at. We can see the client name and the date, or just pause. Hopefully there's enough difference now between the NULP and the train player that you'll know that you're watching a pre-recorded one or you're doing a brand new one. You know, if I had this running today and it had the date of July 17th, 2015 on it, I'd be pretty confident that I was playing something back. But if you see value in that, it's there for you. I really wanted to show you the tools menu here. Remember we talked about if you right click or tap and hold on the tools icon, you're going to get this sub menu under tools. Under session, it will always default to the regular session, 33-minute session. You have the ability to select an extended session, a demo, or a custom time. Extended is going to play a 45-minute session. Demo is going to play a 15-minute session. Val will tell you, and he's crunched all the numbers for years and years, that the regular session, the 33-minute session, is what he calls the sweet spot. It is maximum value for the time, and why we now default to 33 minutes. You can go 45 minutes, but there's really a point of diminishing returns there. You don't get a substantially more neurofeedback benefit for that extra 12 minutes. You won't do any harm. I mean, if you enjoy laying back for 45 versus 33, you know, feel free to do it. There's not much added benefit for doing that. Demo session, not a lot of benefit to that unless you can get somebody in to experience it for 15 minutes if you're just wanting to show them what it feels like. Here's where we can swap personal mode for professional mode. Remember, in personal mode, we're not going to have access to the matrix mirror. We're not going to have access to those after session views. A little cleaner and easier, and provides the same benefit. The preferences that we've talked about there, and Sam showed you, and I think system preferences is where we can set some different defaults. You might want to get in there and play around or just see what options you've got. Pass, we can go directly to the pass section. Remember, that's at members only.
Clicking here will open up a browser and take you directly to the Zen Connect page.
If we need to refresh licensing, it's really doing this automatically now. Typically not a reason to restart the NO Media Player. You can get to how-to videos here, same way you can get to them through the pass section. But what I really want to show you here is show contextual help. I think this is something that very few people catch on just the manual. It's really a powerful thing as you're learning the system. When you clicked on show contextual help, it's going to give you a separate window on wherever your cursor is. So right now my cursor is obviously over the tools icon. And if I have show contextual help clicked, it's going to show me this. Oh yeah, I can set session length here. I can set to run as a personal version of the program. I can run ZAMP tests. I'm going to show you that in a second. I can set preferences. I can set clients confidential. So just by cursoring around, I am exploring what all of the different options are. That's something that as new users, you might want to use for the first little bit. It's probably something that after a week or two, you think, I'm so tired of that screen jumping up and down every time I move my mouse around, and you might want to close it. But it's there. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. The last thing is there are Z-amp tests. That's one of those items under tools. Most of the time, you're not going to be saying, gee, I think I want to test my Z-amp. And if you're to that point, you're probably on a Zen Connect, and one of the IT support people are going to have control of your system, and they're going to run Z-amp tests. But where you can use it is to test your sensors. What we do to test our sensors: live EEG with nulled sensors. This is exactly how we want to set it. We want to set this to live EEG. There's a couple different tests there. Our system is a 60 hertz system because we're in the US. If you're in Europe, this is going to be 50. You might want to go here to make sure it's set correctly that way. If you null your sensors, now by nulled sensors, what I mean is you simply stack them all up, just like that. Basically short them all together. If the sensors are good, you're going to have a display something like this. Right and left, right on top of each other. If they're good, they're going to be like this. Not exactly on top of each other, but really very close. You can see what right is the pink and left is the blue. Always in everything, the right is pink. I always remember right is red and red is close to pink, but the menu over here. If there's a break in one of those wires, or it's not making good contact somewhere, one of these or both of these is going to be dramatically different than this almost flat line. Now at that point, I don't say, oh, well, something's wrong in the pink, which is the right. I'm going to replace just the right set. That's time just to replace the whole set of sensors. You know, if one broke, then you're just waiting for the other side to break. They're the same age, you've treated them the same. Not much sense trying to figure it out. When they're bad, put a new set on and roll.